And just for those who don't know, I'm Councillor Dunbar, and I'm sort of very big on, obviously, equality in Bradford. I've recently helped Council rewrite its equality objectives.
I'm Janice Thornton. I've lived in Bradford all my life. I am a humanist celebrant, which means that I conduct non-religious ceremonies for people, including partnership ceremonies, marriages, funerals, and naming ceremonies, and adoption ceremonies. I'm also lesbian, and I've been round the circuit that we seem to keep going round many times in terms of fighting for rights, and it's really nice to see so many people here who feel able to come and talk about these issues. And of course the Humanists have been fighting for equal rights for a very long time.
I'm Gez Hodgson. I'm from an organisation called Quest, which is a national LGBT support group for Catholics and other Christians. I'm actually the convener for Quest in the North, just so you go right from one coast to the other in our group. And in terms of how it links with the title, the Faith, Religion, LGBT Rights, well, I suppose I'm coming from it from the point of view of, if I believe that we've got one creator, that God made us in his image and likeness, then we all have equality before God anyway. So it's a starting point rather than an end point where we're getting to. We start from that premise. That would be my argument anyway. So we basically just support anybody who needs kind of one-to-one support or group support in the northern region. Come back to that.
I'm Topher, and I'm the elected officer at University of Bradford, LGBT plus officer. I basically cater for all the students and run events and stuff like that at the University of Bradford. I personally have no religious affiliation, but I'm more of the approach of positivity brings positive things. So if you keep thinking negatively about things, then more negative things will happen. I suppose it's sort of seen as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think you're going to have no money, or you moan about having no money, then you'll have no money. But if you maybe think positively about it, oh, it'll be okay, or something like that, then you won't be as poor, for one example. And that's pretty much it.
I'm Edmondson. I'm the elected LGBT plus officer here at Bradford College. I do a similar role to what Topher does at the university. Again, personally, I don't have any religious views. Yeah, you kind of got to, like, if we all respect each other, things will go a lot smoother, so to speak.
Thank you.
I'm Saorsa Tweedale. I work for the Department for Work and Pensions. I'm based at Manningham Job Centre. I'm a National Diversity Ambassador for the department, which means I go into employers and talk to them about their diversity policies, primarily LGBT policies, but also across the board. I'm a very out trans person, as you can guess, and I'm also a very out lesbian, which tends to cause a lot of consternation when I talk about that. For my sins, and I use that appropriately, I was also head of religious studies at a secondary school. My first degree is religious studies and philosophy, and I'm personally a pagan, and wrote paganism into the Ealing syllabus as the first borough that had paganism on the teaching agenda back in the 90s. And my personal view is that when you take any religion out of context and you try and go back to when that religious text was written and impose the viewpoints of that day, then you're headed to trouble. But the fundamentals of all world religions are actually accepting of LGBT, and the commandment of all the religions, the first commandment of all the religions, is to love. And it doesn't say who you should love, it just is to love. And if we start from that standpoint, a lot of these issues would go away.
Adam?
Yeah, that's why I'm that name. Hi. Well, as is the Muslim tradition, Assalamu alaikum, that means peace be upon you all, and salam simply means peace upon all. Literally, that's what it means, peace upon all, because it has no specifics in terms of who you give it to, because peace is deserving upon all people, and that has always been a tradition of Islam. I'm a young student imam. I've been a faith activist for the last 10 years. I've studied scholastically in the Islamic traditions and Judeo-Christian traditions abroad, in this country. Growing up, faced a lot of issues around bullying, had a lot of friends who were LGBT themselves, and so I sort of see myself as an independent theologian. I spend a lot of time broadcast journalism, radio, television, public speaking, working in mosques, trying to understand people. I see myself as a student and only a student, and I find that even though I may have some answers to certain issues, we're all students of life, and there's a lot that we can learn. When it comes to LGBTQ, in some senses, you must remember that Islam is a broad church, and that to simply say this is the Islamic view, just as it is the pagan or the Christian view, is inadequate, because they are very broad schools of thought, very broad schools of looking at things. And I always find, I would sort of say, in part the opposite of my wonderful colleague, that sometimes when you actually go through the history, the heritage, and you phase out the socio-political elements of religion, and you go back to the founders of the faith, and the places in which those texts originate, you will find a very different narrative. If you remove the cultural element, you'll find a very different element to what were those original principles. What did Muhammad, peace be upon him, say? And what did he not say? What did he and did he not comment on? And who was he actually living around? Because there were transgender people, including het, who served in the household of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad. Most Muslims don't know about that. There was a couple who happened to be gay, and they came before the Prophet of God, and he simply offered them food and went away. And actually, when you look at the heritage of the 4 imams of Islamic jurisprudence, the first Imam Abu Hanifa said, I can't see any issue with this conversation. The second 2 imams said, don't ask these questions. And the 4th Imam said, I'm confused, why are we debating this? So when you look at the first 4 centuries of Islam, you see a very different authority on how LGBTQ conversations took place to the last 500-600 years. And partly that is due to colonialism, partly it's due to ignorance, and partly it's due to the destruction of the Islamic education system. And when you begin to look into heritage and history, you begin to realize a very different narrative and picture to the one you were brought up with. And that's why it's important to evaluate academia, to evaluate your own search, your own journey. At the end of the day, we're all identifying. Somebody once said to me, a person never has a stagnant identity. Identity is constantly evolving, changing, and developing. And so we must embrace change, and we must embrace that our identity is constantly on the move. And we can't do that without interaction. So as the Quran says, you must come to common terms with the other. And I cannot understand or dare to define the other if I do not interact lovingly and with sincerity. And that's why I'm here, to sincerely, openly and honestly sit amongst others. I might say myself may not have 100% the same views, but when the best friends agree on the same football team or the same television program, it's very natural for the best of friends to disagree on many things, but the things that bring those 2 friends together makes the relationship strong. And that's why I comfortably and happily sit here as a Muslim and wish to enjoy the conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll open it up to some questions from people who have attended, but I want to sort of kick it off to the panel with a question I put down in light of what's been happening across the pond with the election of Mr. Trump, and a lot's been talked of with a so-called executive order which might be being enforced around religious freedom. So my question to the panel is, can society protect LGBT rights without compromising religious freedom? Can we start with Gez?
Give me the question again.
Can society protect LGBT rights without compromising religious freedom?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a Trump issue.
It's not.
We're getting it more and more in this country, in a sense, with the problem of conscience of a so-called believer vis-a-vis equality. That issue, that kind of problem is surfacing quite a lot. Really. You've only got to look at the Northern Ireland situation of the gay cake and so on. That, you know, that kind of sums up the problem we've got. I think to an extent I agree with Adam's, you know, direction of travel, that if we do it with mutual respect, where you don't want to win an argument and destroy the person, you know, on the other side of that debate, then equality and freedom of conscience should be able to sit together. And the problem about the kind of polarised debate, say in the Northern Ireland thing, or, you know, across the pond where you take a view of a person or LGBT you know, lifestyle, is you basically want to say this is in or this is out, and so it becomes a binary debate, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be. I think it's to do with the tolerance of the debate. So I don't think there's necessarily a contradiction.
Saorsa, what do you think?
I think there's always going to be a tension between certain fundamental views held on both sides. There's some people in the LGBT community, for example, that are very anti-religious, just as there are religious people that are very anti-LGBT. But, again, trying to sound like a broken record here, it's all about dialogue and talking between the groups and all the different interfaith, just as you have interfaith discussions, having LGBT stroke faith discussions, because all faiths, some in denial, some more openly, have members of the LGBT community amongst them. And it's about respecting those members of those community and having their voice heard. As Adam quite rightly said, there are many Muslims within Bradford who would identify as LGBT. It's having them have a voice, and the communities, the religious communities themselves, having the debate amongst themselves, not necessarily with the secular community, so that they can identify their religious path to be inclusive of LGBT people. So I think it's a very multidimensional debate, and any kind of prescription doesn't help it in the slightest.
What about Sam?
Well, I was just thinking about that, is that it's about people having the confidence to come forward and discuss their issues with other people and, you know, have that open discussion with one another. It's like, as my role as LGBT plus officer at the university, you know, I'd like people in the Bradford community to come forward and, you know, tell me about their issues they're having and try and help them in a way, because I'm naturally caring for, like, everyone. I try to care for everyone as much as possible, and I'd love these people to come forward so that I could try and, you know, aid them in some way, and try and, you know, bring peace between opposite opinions. But, you know, there are some times when, you know, that can be quite hard to achieve, but it's about, as I've mentioned before with the positivity, it's about trying to think positively of things rather than thinking that it's not going to work or it's not going to happen, and that's sort of where I stand on it.
We'll bring other members of the panel and then we'll open it up to you for your really difficult questions. Janice.
Thank you, Richard. If you start from a perspective of views that faith has no place in government and in public institutions, that faith is a very personal thing, and the beliefs of individuals are something that are very important to them and should be respected, but that because we have so many different religious viewpoints and faiths within society, society itself, the government and the institutions and public services, should be organised without faith influencing how they are delivered and the decisions that we make. And I think if you start from that point of view, then you're likely to get a better service to everybody, rather than one that includes some people and not excludes others, etc. As regards over the pond, I think what I find most frightening is that one individual who's been given an enormous amount of power seems to be heading down exactly the same road as Hitler. And he started with gay people. He started with people who were considered to have mental disease or disability, who was considered to be genetically other, and then who were culturally other, who were religiously other. Communists were included in that, and millions of people were killed. And what's most frightening, I think, for many people around the world is that this man, who's just been democratically elected, which is a system I normally have great respect for, is now trying to create, they're the other, and we're going to blame them for all the problems. And I find that quite frightening, because it'll be coming our way next.
Ash, do you want to say anything?
Going on what you were saying, slightly, the Trump is kind of by basically saying he's going to build a wall against Mexico, and he's going to kick all people out from Pacific countries that are specifically Muslim. It's basically blaming the Muslim religion for all the problems and saying they're the problem, we're not having them in the country. But it's just an odd view that basically make the religion look bad, and it's basically punishing everyone for a few people's bad actions.
Last but not least, Adam.
I just feel sorry for Trump. You know, when he was asked, what's your favourite Bible quote, and he couldn't give one, he said Matthew something something. That's sad, you know. I hope he can take his own faith seriously, and I hope in his own journey he evolves. My religion tells me about my forgiveness. I can forgive the man for being silly about his stupid policies. And one thing I will share from this conversation, because of what you framed, is I've realised actually that when the Muslim ban was happening, well, it's got the travel ban. Let's be diplomatic for now. When the travel ban for Muslims was happening, I wasn't shocked, because I've been shocked before, but I was just amazed about how many different types of people with different identities and backgrounds, including some of my LGBT plus friends, leading on the protests and the debate against him, that I struggle with in my own community to find certainly, and that's partially because sometimes monastic traditions, people who are very monastic, they avoid politics altogether. Sometimes we argue that politics doesn't have to be incorporated within the society. I find with a lot of Buddhist monks, Hindu monks, Muslim imams, they prefer to move away from society. They prefer to be in their place of worship. They're not concerned with politics, they're concerned with people. And so I think we have to recognise that not all religious people care about politics, although I am somebody who tries to push Muslims to engage. But with the research I've done, I'm just so proud of how my LGBTQ friends, before my Muslim friends, stood up and said no. And I'm just very proud of that. And I find that as somebody who researches in Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate crime, I've taken a lot from my Jewish, my Catholic, and my gay because of the research I'm doing, but generally friends over the last 100, 200 years who have been fighting and making roads for me as a Muslim to work out how can I also deal with Islamophobia. It's beautiful how people can polarize these different religions and different groups and say they can't work together. But I find I've been able to do a lot to tackle Islamophobia from the help my LGBT friends have given me, or from the history that they've created alongside my Catholic and Jewish friends. So actually I take the whole Donald Trump situation in a very positive light, because I am an optimist. Prophet Muhammad said, optimism is the essence of faith. And I love what my colleague here says. So it's a bad situation, it's horrible, but we need to see things in an optimistic light. You know, as St. Paul would say, you know, that's something I take from St. Paul quite heavily. Forgive me if I quote incorrectly, I'm only human. So I, as a Muslim who feel directly polarised and abused by what's happening by Trump, have realised that actually I'm able to come closer with people I wouldn't normally associate with because of the beauty of what others have done for me, and I think that's something beautiful. And so There's a saying in the hadith that sometimes bad things have to happen before good things can happen. Sometimes you have to ride waves before you can have the calm. So in a sense, I value what's been happening in a weird way, because it's allowed me to evaluate and see who my real friends are. And then I begin to realise that humanistic relationship between us. I know there's a lot to take in there, but I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible, so I even take the Trump situation in a very positive light.
Thank you. Right, so we'll open it up. Dermot, straight in there.
Can you repeat your question?
I can.
Can sort of bring us back.
Can society protect LGBT rights without compromising religious freedom?
So my point and sort of question around this, to bring it back to that particular question, was surely the only way, the only method in which everyone's rights and views can be respected is a framework of a secular society, a society that gives no specific privilege to any one group, that allows people to believe what they want, to do what they want, provided that it doesn't affect others, and for everyone to get along. And then we have and there's a rule of law around that, which is allows people to do what they wish. But it's only truly that secularism, which is a much maligned and misunderstood concept. It doesn't mean rabid atheists going around telling people they can't believe in whatever they want. That's what some people like to think, including the Pope, I believe, has said something like that. It's actually about a framework that allows people to believe what they want, to be who they want to be, and only then, that's the only system I can think of that allows that sort of freedom. So I wanted to think, the question is secularism the only way in which everyone's rights can be respected?
What does anybody else think on that? Anybody else got a view on that? Disagree with it? Agree with it?
Well, I think it related to what Janice said earlier about if we just forget everyone's, let's just focus on people rather than what religion they have, and let's not use religion to make decisions and stuff like that. It relates to that, and I believe in that as well. As me having no religion, I focus on people and positivity as opposed to anything else.
Is the American government not secular? Very, supposedly. Separation of religion and state.
Church and state, yeah.
So it doesn't seem to help them.
There are different interpretations of secularism. So the American system has a very clear separation of church and state, which can be seen a bit strange at times in terms of how religion's taught in schools, for instance. The French also have a very interesting interpretation of secularism, which they take to mean that they can tell women, what they can and can't wear, for instance, or anybody with religious symbols in certain places, which is the laicite, which is a very odd sort of interpretation of what secularism really should be about. It doesn't really go with the spirit, but that's the French interpretation. So there are ways, there isn't one type of secularism, there are different ways of doing it, but a secularism that allows everyone to be what they want, to wear what they want, believe what they want, is the only way we can do that. But in a society like that, everyone has to accept that where their beliefs interface with someone else's, it doesn't give them, nobody has more right than another. That's the friction point.
I would just...
I was going to bring somebody else in.
Go
for it. Go on.
I differ with Janice slightly in the sense that you wanted to take religion out of the public space. I agree that it shouldn't be the dominant dictator of policy, but because there are huge numbers of people of faith, whatever type of faith they are, in a way you can't, well, I wouldn't want to reduce religion or faith to a personal thing. There's a long tradition in Catholicism of social teaching where my faith dictates my politics, not the other way around. And therefore I believe in justice, because the prophets in the Old Testament were hugely influential in the kind of stride towards justice, as in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But so there's a lot of people who are good-hearted but come from a direction of faith, but will work towards equality. My father was great in the trade union movement, and that was because of his faith, not because of his politics. So it's where you're coming from. I think is important as well. But I do take your point. But secularism...
Go on, Janice.
Can I
quickly
respond
come
to
back.
that? Both
Yeah,
my
go on.
parents were extremely political from a perspective of atheism. They were both very moral. They had very high values, which they inflicted on all 7 of their children. And they both believed, and I have to go along with it, that you can be a good, moral, ethical person without having to have that directed by any particular faith. That humanism and atheism and secularism is about believing in the individual and about human beings and their potential for good. So whilst I respect that your efforts to have a better society come from your religious beliefs, it's really important that we understand that there are lots of people in this country who are not religious, but who are good people.
Oh, yes. Yep, go for it.
First of all, I just want to say I've not known Adam very long, but the wisdom that comes out of that person's mouth always stuns me, and it bodes well for the future of people from my community. So I'm very proud to call him a friend. I think with all the rhetoric of Trump at the moment, I think one of the biggest things that I found, and again echoing what Adam said about having to go through rough times to actually find out, find that calm. I've actually been quite surprised by a lot of the Arabic world who have not been very forthcoming and kind of challenging Trump's remarks. But the thing that I found most surprising and the most encouraging is that the Pope, a Catholic who is, people think he's a million miles away from Islam, he's actually been one of the loudest voices when it's come to protecting immigrants and political refugees and people seeking asylum. I think as long as people keep echoing that, I do believe, whether you're humanist or you're secular or whatever, I think if you keep those fundamental principles of protecting life, I think it bodes well for the future. So I have to remain an optimist because I do kind of feel let down by a lot of the Arabic world at the moment when it's come to taking in refugees and it's come to looking after people. As long as we have all these different opinions and different theological aspects, fundamentally, if we look after each other on a human level, I think the future bodes well. So that's all I wanted to say.
I didn't pay him anything for that, by the way.
We can see the wrapper off his bum.
Oh, right. Oh, for me, but okay. Fine.
Has anybody else got any more questions?
I've got another contribution
Go
on
for
this
it.
topic of secularism. Secularism actually doesn't have the sole hold on being fair and treating everybody equally just because we're non-religious. Now, this came from a Catholic priest, a Vatican priest no less. My pagan friend was in the Vatican with the pentacle around his neck, and the Vatican priest came up to my friend and said, "Do you want to know my definition of a pagan?" My friend thought, "Uh-oh, here we go." And the Vatican priest turned around and said, "It's someone who doesn't argue about religion." The reason being, in paganism, the golden rule is do what thou wilt, but harm none. And that all religious paths are paths to divine understanding, including secularism, as much as it pretends not to be a belief system, it is. And because there's just as much proof for the non-existence of God as there is for the existence of God. It's a belief that there's no God. We don't know. And therefore, anybody who is striving to fulfill the goals of their religion is following a path to divine understanding, understanding themselves, understanding the human condition, and therefore let them follow that path. Do not argue about religion. And I don't believe paganism is the only religion that believes that. I think most religions believe that so long as you are devout in your faith, you are developing your soul, your path, and moving forward. But when the state start to impose their view of what a religion should be, I think people of that religion quite often stand up and say, "No, not in our name." And that's what should be done. When the state abuses religious belief, and says we're doing it in the name of your religion because it's our state religion, then that's wrong. But I've seen many examples throughout history where people have rebelled against their state because their state has done precisely that, not in my name. So secularism isn't necessarily the solution. Enough secular states attack their populace.
I think that central rule of whatever central bit of paganism that you mentioned there, see what thou wilt and harm none, is common to pretty much every faith. Anti-humanism, it's the basis of being a human, isn't it? So, but then also innately people are capable of good and evil, aren't they? So they will use the rules and beliefs that are taught in the wrong way when temptation hits them. And I do think that a secular framework is a way of checking and balancing that, because it's neutral, it's not coming from any particular faith. And that would be the way that I would support that argument.
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, apart from the underlying assumption of your argument that all religions are good. The religions themselves might be, but the way that they are often interpreted by people who want to impose them and who want to use the religion in as a political tool. So not all churches are good, and not all strands of all religions are heading towards the best for all human beings, because some churches are actively opposed to LGBT plus.
Just as some
people.
Secular groups are.
Well, quite, but the secular ones are usually a lot less organised.
And secular states are responsible for murdering millions of people.
But they don't do it in the name of secularism, that's the difference.
What have I just said about religion? We don't do it in the name of religion either. Secularism doesn't have all the answers. Yes, religious states have done it in the name of their religion, but secular states have done it in the name of secularism as well. So you can't...
Communism did it in the name of communism.
Exactly.
Not in the name of secularism. Not in the name of
I
atheism.
wasn't just thinking of communist states, but communism is an example of a secular state that actively went out positively to divorce state and religion.
Okay, I'm conscious there are other people. I love when there's disagreement on a panel, it's great, it brings a bit of life to it. Is there anybody else who's round the table who wants to ask a question, something burning they want to ask? I sure are expecting you to be...
I actually was going to say, because I've tracked Trump's progress even before, I believe, forced him to watch the 10-15 years ago. So, yeah, I'm aware of his sort of behaviour. But that was a TV show, that was a game show, whatever. You never thought that would actually transfer from entertainment into real life. I've been following his progress, and what has alarmed me, and I know we talked about keeping the whole discussion around faith and politics and so on. Every single time Trump made any kind of comments, he galvanized this extreme element in American society and somehow got them excited and got them to come out and obviously vote for him and so on. Now, he is where he is, not because of his rhetoric, but because people believed in his rhetoric and went out and voted for him. And we've got the same element. I think somebody said about Brexit, and it's coming here, and it's already here. You know, you've got people being attacked every single day, and it's not going to get easier. And what alarms me as a Muslim woman is this kind of thing about, well, we talk about politics and so on, but the real human life stories we're not actually being able to discuss properly. And I know I was thinking about going to America, you know, I'm really concerned now. I'm British born, I have no other nationality, I don't want any other nationality. Bizarrely, that's the only reason I chose not to take on Pakistani nationality, is because if I go to Pakistan, I'm going to get stranded and the foreign office won't help me. Instead, now, there's no protection against racism, there's no protection against discrimination. Now we have somebody like Trump in power. I'm really concerned. And I spoke about the whole idea about abortion rights and all these things that are being Mexicans and, you know, everybody together. But I'm disappointed at, you know, the Arab world. They're so silent. And I'm going to Greece tomorrow to help work with refugees, the Syrian refugees. It really annoys me. I don't want to swear because I don't want to get recorded. It really annoys me that they can do more and they're choosing not to. And that's a choice. They're making that choice. And yeah, it really annoys me. Extreme from both sides.
Yeah, going back to Trump, Trump basically automatically assumes that all Muslims are bad.
Yeah.
That, but one group of Muslims have done this, now all Muslims are going to do it. He's basically targeting that one religion because some members of that religion have done something bad in the name of the religion.
It's an escape though, just so the Jewish religion was an scapegoat to use the Weimar Republic was an issue, and many of its leading members happened to be secular atheist Jews, and so Hitler utilised their religions to hide the reality of why economically the state was falling apart. That's exactly what's happening. We forget in America, you know, under 50% of the population is somewhere close to the breadline. It's economics that's the play here, not religion. That's the problem with what Trump's getting up to.
Yeah.
What I will say is sometimes we do expect certain Arab states, such as Saudi Arabia, to speak up because they have a big voice on platforms. But remember, the ban has been very particular about who would silence. So countries like Saudi Arabia I think they should do, haven't necessarily needed to speak up because they haven't been a part of the ban. But much poorer countries such as Sudan, which is in a civil war, Egypt, which is in a political destruction at the moment and its media is ruined, they've got so many internal problems, there is no united voice. Yet they are the countries in the Arab world that are a part of the ban. I think we also have to reframe the way in which we define the Arab world and who we expect to speak up. Because many of the countries we expect to speak up aren't a part of the ban, and many of those who are a part of the ban are internally divided. So I just throw that element into the conversation.
I think the point Janice made about we're facing fascism across the pond is correct, but like I should have said, we got it here. I gave a training session in the PCS on my trade union where I quoted Pastor Niamullah. First they came for the trade unionists, but I was not a trade unionist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the communists, but I was not a communist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the socialists, but I was not a socialist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the Jews, but I was not a Jew, so I said nothing. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Look at what's been happening in Britain. The trade union laws, restricting the powers of trade unions, making trade unions the enemy within, that are somehow fighting against the people. What kind of twisted logic is that? But that's how they've been painted. Look how when Jeremy Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party on a popular vote, he was seen as anti-democratic because the people had elected him. But there was a massive press initiative to discredit him, so made Labour so unelectable. And then what happened straight after Brexit? The people who voted for Brexit quite openly said that it was to do with Little Englander, it was to do with racism, all that kind of bigotry that feeds fascism. And the rise in attacks on the LGBTQ community went up 128% on the 3 months after Brexit.
147.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. To the previous 3 months in the previous year, massive rise. 2 days, it was a group in London walking down the street chanting, "First we'll get out the Poles, then we'll get out the gays." Who did Putin target in Russia when he came to power? The LGBT community. In America, when they made equal marriage for gay people, what happened? The toilet laws for the trans community. Make no mistake, fascism's here. It's on the rise. And unless the people unite, the type of people that are around this table, then we're in serious danger. But I agree again with Adam, very wise words, that in times of crisis, that's when people come together. that's when people fight, and that's what we should be doing.
Well, that's all really positive stuff. I have a question there because I think increasingly, and particularly young people, the younger generation that are digital natives, communicate via social media and are in silos with people who believe the same things that they do. And people with different beliefs are in another silo and people believe that they don't believe the same things that they do. And it's, you know, these kind of forums are really hard to create without wanting to be too negative. You know, I expect the attendance to be much bigger today because they're issues that young people do care about and know they do. But people aren't here. They're in this sort of bubble, and just how do we break that bubble?
Yeah, good question. How do we do that? That's a good question. How do we?
Again, what you're talking about, engaging with young people, I think last year we saw a 56% increase in hate crime after the Brexit, and it's not even here yet. If Article 50, I feel, is executed in summer, I think we're going to have a massive summer of discontent. In the meantime, I think places like places of teaching, I think we have an extra responsibility to equip our young people to be able to be constructively critical, because you either constructively criticise or you take on an anarchist level of kind of engagement, which, you know, I don't think is always helpful, and I don't think it's engaging, and I don't think it's nurturing. You know, of all the kind of community meetings I've been in the past month, I always see the regular faces, which is always good because they've taken time and made sacrifices to their families to be there. But I think we need to start dragging, kind of making feel, giving positive reinforcement for the young people that do come to these things, because it's them that are going to be carrying on this battle, and also equipping them and giving them that ability to be able to criticise and talk with us and engage with us. But I was involved in an incident a couple of weeks ago where a young gentleman was shot, and I was the first person to go there and give him medical attention. And there's been lots of meetings afterwards about community outpouring of grief and concern and anxiety. But every place I've gone to, I don't see enough black people, I don't see enough Asian people, but particularly I don't see enough young people. And I think, especially places of learning, we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? What could we be doing more to engage them and to bring them here? Because, like I said, it's going to be affecting them, and I think they're going to be our allies in this battle.
On that, then, as I'm not making no assumptions, but I guess Ashley is one of the youngest people here today. Why do you think young people might not be engaging in forums such as this?
Probably because there's, I'm about to say, there's not enough, in schools there's not enough discussions, schools and colleges, not enough discussions about faith and equality and LGBT. There's not enough discussions, there's not enough output out there about it. And so I won't say it that way because we're being filmed, but they don't, young people of the future don't really give a damn much about faith and equality and LGBT.
I don't agree with you. Sorry, I disagree
Well,
with you.
Right.
I don't agree with you.
Can we quickly bring Janice in? She did have her hand up, then yourself, and you, Topher.
I think in Shipley, that unknown little market town outside Bradford, we proved differently, because we were called by our MP feminist zealots, so we took the name on board and called ourselves Shipley feminist zealots. He said, these women who want equality want to have their cake and eat it, so we made cakes and gave them out to everybody. And from that very small grassroots reaction, we took on the tools of the youngest people. We used social media to build a following of over 600 people on Facebook, on the page that about.
2 days we've got 500 followers.
And then we organised, in support of our sisters in America, a march in Shipley, which is unheard of. We told the policeman that, there might be, a couple of hundred people there. We had 1,400 people on the streets of Shipley, stopping the traffic, carrying banners, brilliantly creative placards and everything. And that was done via social media, and it was done by tackling something really important. It's not partisan, so it's not attached to any political group. It's completely secular. people of all faiths welcome, people of no faiths welcome, and completely about equal rights are human rights. And just by sending out that very clear message, we managed to get that many people on the streets of Shipwell. I mean, the Market Square, I've never seen so many people. So it is possible to get people out. It is possible, and we organised that with 3 weeks' notice, I mean, really. And it is possible to use social media.
Sorry, I just have to
Sorry, there's a few more people coming first.
My name is Mohammed Ateem. I work at Bradford College and I'm a youth practitioner here. So I work with a lot of young people. So one of my questions is for Adam, and you made some very pertinent points and from the Islamic faith. The thing I really struggle with when working with young people, and some of you work with young people, is within the Muslim faith, young people still don't want to discuss this. It's never mentioned on the pulpit on a Friday. Why not? These issues should be mentioned on the pulpit on a Friday. I've been around, I've been knocking on mosques. We need to engage with this group of young people. But how can we move forward from this? How can we engage with LGBT people? Because at the end of the day, Islam is about equality, diversity, being inclusive. So how can we engage with young people?
Well, I've given it on the pulpit a few times, and I haven't had any problems. The city centre of Leeds has its own masajid mosque.
We're talking about what? In a city, in a city, Bradford.
There'll always be an issue, and I'm a member of the Inclusive Mosque as well. I've worked extensively with them. I take my son to London. The only way I can expose my son to human rights, equality, and to show him a world outside of Keighley, which is where he's born and brought up, and Bradford is to take him to events in London and Dunbar and so on. So this is not the only way. There's a much wider world out there, and he's really comfortable talking about it. He's telling me about all sorts of things that the kids themselves are talking about. About atheism, they're talking about being gender fluid and transgender and everything. So the kids have their own language and they're talking to each other, but somehow there seems to be like a gap between parents and children. Maybe because they're afraid of being, punished or whatever. Yeah, there's stigma as well. But I think we can actually give the messages out that it's okay no matter who you are, what you are, how you feel. I remember when I was growing up, and I'm quite old, guys, but when I was growing up, it was haram, it was gunah, that's it. There was no two ways about it. And I mean, we had, speaking of, we had a Jummah in Bern, in Switzerland, and I took a picture of the Inclusive Mosque being led by a female without a hijab, and that picture went viral, 48,000 within 24 hours, and over 150,000 after 48 hours. And we were getting death threats. We were being sent abuse. We were saying, this is haram, this is not Muslim, you guys are going to burn in hell, etc., etc. And it really, really shocked me, the vitriol that we faced, because we had a female leading first, a female, positive female role model, in a leadership position. So we need to talk about it. And I'll be honest, I forced it on my son. He had no choice in the matter. But there are parents where you need to actually engage.
Can we bring Topher?
See, before I came to the University of Bradford, I was a chemistry teacher in Leeds and Bradford, and as that role, we had a tutor group, and weekly activities throughout my training and in the schools was on one particular day in the tutor group. We'd have a news session and we'd discuss news topics. Now, don't get me wrong, half of the class wouldn't say a thing, they'd just keep to themselves and wouldn't have an opinion. But there were some really outspoken students, so when people say that young people don't have a clue and don't have any opinion on anything, yeah, they're right in a way because some people don't speak up, but there are a lot of people, if you look across the nation, that they will speak up. However, it's about getting those that don't speak up to try and have an opinion, and sometimes it's the parents having a driving force on their beliefs, and they're not allowing them to be themselves, and that's what makes the child scared to come out to their parents if they are of LGBT, or they're scared that they'll disrespect their parents because of their religious beliefs or anything like that. And we need to sort of dispel those prejudices. How we do that is another matter. So if anyone wants to input on how we may be able to do that, then...
I know when you chair you meant to like just let other people speak, but I am going to say something. I think on that point, one thing, my professional background is as a youth worker, and the one key thing I always noticed was giving young people a space to be themselves, starting where they're from in their lives, not prejudging them, not having an assumption. That's the absolute key thing, what I noticed about any young people who's more likely to flourish. But when you've got all these challenges, what are happening, whether it's from the parents or whether it's from their perception of what a parent will think because of their religious beliefs, for example. But then you also look at it, I'm going to get political, I'm a politician, is when you look at some of the services what are being cut. When you look at services what are being cut, young people disproportionately are affected by the cuts. You drill down even more. LGBT people are more disproportionately affected by the cuts. Drill down even more. Trans people are more disproportionately affected in the LGBT element. Do you know what I mean? So it's about giving them that space and looking at, despite all the cuts, what can we do together? Like, how does the university got an LGBT support group? How can that link up with a sound youth group, which is a youth service youth group? How can it link up with other religious youth groups, whatever? It's that linking project. It's when we become stuck in those silos you were talking about, where I get a little bit scared. It's like, what can we do, despite all the rubbish what's going on around us? How can we draw on people's strengths so people are talking? Because when young people don't talk, that's when you see the exacerbation of those mental health issues and those problems. So it's giving them the space to be themselves. And I'll shut up there. I think you did have your hand up first.
I was
Sorry.
saying, at our college we've created safe spaces for
Yeah.
positive discussion, which is just around the corner, and Rebecca, myself, the youth practitioners, both of us. And we've created safe spaces for young people to come and have some discussions. And I think it was last week we had an imam from Leicester, I think Adam was there, the Sexualized Society.
Which one?
With Imam Khalid.
I thought your face was familiar.
We had an event with an imam and there were a few other people who were working at the university, and the topic was, it wasn't the prophetic tradition, or it wasn't a religious topic, it was a topic about is society sexualized? And that kind of topic would have never been tackled before. And we spoke to young people, have a positive discussion, and Adam was there, and Adam can elaborate a bit more on that, providing safe spaces for young people to have discussions.
So can we come in? Sorry, Dermot, then Ash, then Topher, you had your hand up, then... Oh, sorry. Can we bring these people in first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's just a really quick point. My name's Rob. I work here, but I'm not speaking as a person who works here. I think your point that these services are the ones that have been cut and targeted by cuts, the spaces for people to be themselves, that's one of the most dangerous parts to where we can do it, because the vacuum that's created by those spaces means that people are going to dangerous places on the internet. They're looking to, they don't have anywhere to discuss things openly with other people like themselves in a safe environment. So they become, and we know that it can become, I'm going to use the word radicalised in a kind of violent way. And some of us know instances where that's happened around here. And it's just like, it's not just that as well. It's the young people don't always even feel like that they're welcome in mosques and places of worship either. That those communities don't mean something to them either. So it's just like I really struggle to see where
we can actually find a place that you know, people can be like that. When we're casting a youth service, we're not funding colleges properly to provide this kind of support. So
so we'll bring this lady in first.
Sorry, sure.
Yeah, I have to say, yeah, the thing is, we were like, we had a girls group today, and we just said to them, like, what do you want to talk about? And that was one of the things they said in it, LGBTQ, like, that was it. And it was just simply by going, well, what would you like to talk about? Like, we didn't impose anything upon them. All Muslim girls, almost like...
No. But it's providing that space
yeah.
for discussion, otherwise, sorry, go for it. Rob, they're on the internet and they're getting the wrong information.
Have you finished your point?
No, you just finished my point, that's what I was going to say.
Alright, cool. Bring Dermot, because he's been waiting a little while.
So, there's really good conversation around here. A lot of it's going towards you know, youth, which is kind of appropriate for the college and things, and LGBT, and religion is sort of a little tangential at the moment on this. I would just say in the first instance that it's obvious that there's a lot of great people around here and very accepting, and that's terrific, and it's kind of what I expect, but it is good to see. But it is also quite clear that in the wider world, there are a great number of people who profess the religious faith who are incredibly bigoted, and not just bigoted, they can be, you know, actively violent against LGBTQ people. Whether that's Islamic State pushing gay people off buildings, or whether it's what's the group in the Westboro Baptist Church saying God hates fags. You know, it's all over the place. There's an awful lot of prejudice out there.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about, well, what can be done by people of faith to challenge those people who ostensibly seem to share the same title of their beliefs, but actually probably have not that much in common with them other than a sort of very basic belief. And then it came to thinking about, because we're talking about youth, about what role can we play in education, especially at a younger age. And it comes to mind that a private member's bill from Caroline Lucas came through the Parliament recently for looking at compulsory sexual relationships education. This has been pushed back by government time and time again. But high quality, inclusive SRE in schools, where there is a space for young people to talk about these sorts of issues, is absolutely essential to start that conversation. You can't wait till you get to college to suddenly understand, you know, because at that point you kind of, you know, it's already quite difficult and confusing and all this kind of thing. We have to have it at a younger age, and we really should be pushing the government to have this. Now, the reason the government and the British Humanist Association has been instrumental, as one of the only campaigning groups has been really pushing behind this for very, very many years, is that we have to push government to do this. But the reason it got pushed back recently is because there are religious lobbies in government, specifically the Catholic Church and the Church of England, aspects of their political lobbies there, who push back against that. So the churches won't like it. They won't want to talk about sexual relationship education, or essentially, when they're talking about that, they actually mean about issues around LGBT rights in church schools. So we have to really think about that role of SRE in schools, and quite frankly push back against the religious lobby and say, you know what, no, it's important, everyone needs to learn about this. You can't just be about parents telling their kids. It has to, as a society, we have to be responsible for that. So I'm interested in what people's views are on SRE in schools and pushing back against
Well,
religious.
can we have Ash first, then Topher, then this lady? Rebecca, sorry.
It's all right.
I'm rubbish with you. See, I have to write it down, so I remember it.
Yeah, going on to what you were saying, there was a video, I can't remember, I saw it now, but saying that there's literally no SRE about LGBT in schools. It's all just about straight relationships. There's nothing...
It depends on the school, I think.
Yeah, but just personally, when I was at school locally, they didn't do anything about LGBT when it comes to that. It was just all about straight relationships. There was nothing LGBT. Few schools are like that. I can't speak about every school, but quite a few schools I know of are like that. And going back to what Richard was saying about the funding cuts, it would be a good idea if I know it's hard for the council being cut themselves, but if we could at least invest a little bit more into like the youth services again, because it's going to affect what happens in the future, and obviously not got safe space, not got as much of a safe space for LGBT youth, so they don't feel as safe. But obviously with funding cuts, council are finding it hard in general to do much.
come and watch me in Council's Chamber and you'll know what my views are on youth service. So, yeah.
I mean, I know you well.
Yeah, Topher, then Rebecca, then Jess. So you remembered your name?
I mean, we were discussing earlier before everyone got here, me, Janice and Gez, about that schools don't teach anything LGBT, SRE, relationships, etc. And yeah, it depends on the school that you go to largely. I've been in a lot of schools because I was supply for a bit, and I also was employed by some schools when I moved around. But largely what I'm seeing is that they taught relationships, and you know, it'd be about interacting with other people, but they never explicitly said, oh, you know, a man can love a man, a woman can love a woman, etc. like that. They said like, oh well, these can be friends and these can be friends and they can love each other, but that's it. You know, it was really, and what I've been trying to, what I've been sort of annoyed by, if you like, is that they don't teach like sexual education as they used to teach sex education. I mean, as a chemistry teacher, we would have to teach biology and physics as well. And the biology syllabus currently, it goes from male and female anatomy straight to development of a fetus in the menstrual cycle. There's no sexual intercourse or anything like that, sexual relationships or anything to do with heterosexual or homosexual or anything else. And I think it's really important that we have that in the science curriculum. As, you know, this is how it happens for gay men, this is how it happens for gay women, and this is how it happens for straight people in reproduction. And, you know, it would be really beneficial to have that out there so that everyone is aware as they're growing up, as opposed to just, as you say, getting to college and going, oh, that's how it works.
Thank you. Sorry, can we just do a few people? Rebecca.
Yeah, I think that sometimes religious institutions are like scared of things being forced on them, that like, oh, they're going to have to accept a certain viewpoint or whatever. So there needs to be a way that like they feel as though they can express their view whilst still being tolerant. Do you get me? Like, we just need to find the balance in society, really. Because I like the way you explained it, because I'd never heard that interpretation before from Islam, so I never knew that that was like the views and stuff, kind of merciful and stuff. So it's like, if we got down to it and maybe explained and looked into the religious books as to like the merciful approach, do you get me? Because it's sometimes that what happens is religious institutions feel alienated, but then everyone else feels alienated, and there seems to be this like two extremes of, it's either like all religion and the lobbyists are pushing back, or it's all like non-religious and the religions are feeling like they're feeling pushed back, and it's like there just needs to be like an acceptance of it's alright to think a different way. Like, I know it sounds really silly, but it's like playground games in politics. Like, you all think a different way, that's fine, but we need to find a way to live together, because Britain is our home, not belongs to certain people, belongs to everybody. So let's create a society that's accepting. And I think what I've seen in youth work is just that, like I say, like me and Azim today, we just ask them, what do you want to talk about? And sometimes when you just give that freedom of whatever you want, whatever you say, we'll go for it. That sometimes is all you need, just a safe space where no one's going to get judged, and it's like, okay, if you say like, I don't agree with this, fine, that's where we're starting. It's not where we're going, but it's where we're starting, and that's okay. So then they can voice their bigotry, and they can voice their like bad views or whatever, and they can be challenging it in a way that's not going to take them down to the ground.
Fantastic. So I'm just conscious we've got only about, that's good. We've got about 5 minutes, so Jez.
It's interesting that the conversation moved on to younger people rather than college people. I mean, I've taught RE for 40 years, so I've worked through Section 28, all through there, in Catholic schools. And Section 28 in a Catholic school made no difference at all. Now, I've worked in this school for the last 5 years in Manchester. This is a Catholic school. It has diversity days. It has LGBT people coming in, speaking. We talk about coming out. We talk about the acceptance of people for who they are, that God created them all equally, and so on and so forth. So you've got to be careful of making a judgment on all institutions.
Definitely.
And what I find, because a Catholic school is not a monolithic institution, and kids are not stupid anymore. They have Snapchat, they have WhatsApp, they have all sorts of social media and talk to people who are not of their kind. So they know some of the stuff that we're trying to, if some people think, trying to avoid. I was working in 1977 when we had to cut out bits on masturbation in a Catholic school because it was seen as not seemly. Now, you'd start from that because these are in the real world.
Yeah.
And you deny your kids at your peril information. So Catholic schools are, some, not all, but this school, and it's a typical school as far as I can see. I know another school, Sixth Form College in Manchester, they send their gay staff, when they're pregnant, flowers. And the nuns supported it all. They said that's what you should be doing. You're a community.
Yeah.
So you've got to get away from the notion that anything to do with an institution, whether it's Islamic, whether it's Catholic, whether it's Methodist, whatever, whether it's secular, that all people think in the same way. They do not. With social media, it's just
So I'm just conscious of Saorsa.
Sorry.
There, to get it right then.
You did.
You see, there we go. I got there again.
Jazz has made a lot of the points that I was going to make.
Yes,
Because like you, I was teaching during section 28. And again, like you being a religious studies teacher, we got personal and social education, as it was called then, which was life skills. So I had to teach sex education. So I was being told I could not teach that homosexual relationships were equally valid.
We just ignored it.
Well, I went to my head teacher and said, if you think, because I was head of religious studies, I said, if you think my department is teaching that, you've got another thing coming. We are breaking the law. I told the head teacher, and we did. We taught them as equally valid. But it does bring me to another point about when you talk about educational institutions and young people, and to quote Lenin, actually, the most dangerous thing to a ruling class is an educated working class people that keeps their class identity. That can be stretched across beyond class. And when I left education, I left education for a specific reason. It was called the national curriculum that shut down critical thinking, that shut down the ability to analyse and to form your own views. But whoa, what's happened since? The social media, where kids go out and find the information for themselves. They're becoming more savvy. I mentioned earlier the election of Jeremy Corbyn, who by young people, not the established Labour Party, young people who were fed up with the current political status quo. So let's put a little faith in our young people, is what I say, because they are savvy. They just need to be given the space, as you said, to think for themselves across the spectrum.
Great. Graham. Sorry.
I suppose I was thinking about what was being discussed a few topics ago, but it does fit in with this. It's important for young people to understand that diversity exists within the communities. So there are different types of Muslim, there are different types of Catholic, there are different types of LGBT people. But because you're LGBT doesn't mean you can't be a bigot. It cuts across lots of different ways, and that should be an essential part of education and diversity education. Because you are a particular faith means that there's an assumption, I think, with young people and people of all ages that because you fit into one group that you can't fit into another group. It's the notion of intersectionality, when actually everybody belongs to lots of different groups and on various spectrums, spectra, and that's the bit that's missing from education for me. I think we're certainly doing some work with it, really. But it's that critical free thinking really that's missing from education, I think.
Brilliant. We'll bring Dermot in, then we're going to get a roundup from all the panellists, a quick 30-second roundup.
That's an excellent point. Isn't it all about identity? Isn't it about people having complex, multifaceted identities. And I spoke before about how people of the same religion, Christians, can be Westboro Baptist Church, or they can be a left-wing Methodist. And the fact of the matter is, we are all very complex individuals, and your LGBT or straight status is only one small part of who you are as an individual. Same with being a Muslim. I've heard Muslims say, we all need to come together as Muslims, this kind of thing. Well, yes, maybe, but you also have to recognise your own diversity, as does every single group. We will have to develop those tools and skills to be confident in our own identities and all the different parts that make that up.
Can we just sort of, from the panellists, quick 30-second round-up thoughts? Adam, we'll start with you, if that's okay.
Isn't it nice just to be sat here? One thing religion teaches me is to value the little things in life, and I think I really have done that today. So thank you to everyone here. I think it's very important to remember that faith reminds us about humility, that if you do believe in a creator or an end, judgment is with him. It isn't necessarily with man. I believe in the individual, but I also believe that the individual should regulate his inner self through others. And as Locke himself said, we can have a liberal democracy, but remember, even if a person has the most aggressive of ideas, it's how he or she practices those beliefs that are most important. And remember, with Brexit, wonderful people believed in out, wonderful people believed in, but they isolated and harmed and abused each other through many spectrums. So even if a person has the most orthodox and anti-gay or anti-lesbian belief, we should remember our inner humanity, our inner maturity and our inner patience, and know that just as my ideas have been constantly developing and changing, what is to stop that person from having a different idea in 10 or 20 years' time? So I think the element of patience, the element of calmness and reflectiveness as we communicate with each other is important. We've learnt that in a secular sense from Brexit. Let's continue to do that as we dialogue with one another.
Thank you very much. Saorsa?
Where do I start? I think it's been a really, really interesting debate, and I've certainly come here and learnt an awful lot from it. A lot about open-mindedness, a lot about the human spirit, a lot about the drive to do well by people. And I think I'm a great believer that if minds can come together from lots of different paths, as I've done tonight, is behoving on everybody around this table, no matter whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, secular, communist, Baptist, no matter, to go out and preach this message of unity and harmony. It sounds very cheesy, but that's basically what humanity is about. And if we can carry that message forward, and I know people around this table do, then there has to be hope, there has to be positive hope, and that's what I think we should end on.
Ash?
One thing I have learned from this is that we need to kind of stick together, look out for each other, and kind of band together to try and get through the bad times. Yes, it's might have bad times now, but the future will be bright. You got to, it's a calm. You got to get through the storm to get to the calm.
Yeah, I mean, it's questionable times that we're in, I suppose. But if we keep our heads up, I mean, there have been a million films where people from different backgrounds have fought against each other initially and then come together to, you know, for the greater good, if you like. And, you know, that's what we need to do in cases of Trump and stuff like that, so that we can overcome these sort of barriers. And, you know, and like one thing that I've valued from this is the stuff about bringing LGBT and SRE into the curriculum. And, you know, I would love to work as an activist to try and get that in. But yeah, that's it.
Yes. Having worked in the kind of system for that, you know, the length of time, I said about 40 years, I've seen the changes, and they've nearly always been for the better, through really difficult times sometimes, in terms of political times, you know, through Thatcherism and all of that kind of stuff. And so the Trump thing, you've got to see in a historical context. It will disappear. It won't be long before it collapses in on itself. Things will then develop. And so I'm quite hopeful because I've seen the changes in young people's attitudes, even in my system, the narrow system, the Catholic system, which is hugely, they're much more accepting and dismissive of the older generation who are not accepting. My one doubt is why they don't get off their asses and do something about it. I mean, in Brexit came about because the young people didn't do anything. And so that's got to be addressed at some point because they're the future. But it's much more hopeful across LGBT issues, across human rights. So I'm quite hopeful as an oldie going out one way and the young ones coming in.
I'm not quite as old as him, I don't think. However, I am the eternal optimist, despite my fears of Trump. I've seen the world panic about a gay plague and how now people who are HIV positive can conduct themselves in a perfectly normal way in society. I've seen Section 28 come and go and be challenged, etc. I've seen gay marriage come. Hooray! Now all we need to do is to get them to actually enact their approval of humanist marriages, which would be really good. So I am the eternal optimist. I do believe that we can make a difference. I do believe that we can all engage with the things that are important to us at the level at which we are able and willing. And I think that I feel there is a sense of energy around that's challenging Trump's ban on people from other countries and that is saying we're not having him giving a speech in Westminster, for example. And so I actually feel very positive about there being more people who are prepared to get off their arses and do something. Great.
Thank you. I'll just finish off by saying a few things. I've learned quite a lot, felt quite inspired actually. It's always, things like this always make me think, what am I going to do now? So I'm probably going to be up till 3 in the morning researching a lot of what a lot of people have said. But for me, it brings me back to my sort of professional background in terms of youth work, and not just young people, but different groups in society, creating those spaces where people can talk and raise the concerns. And it's like, how do we do that? How do we create those networks in light of all the challenges that we currently face? And I think Dermot's point about compulsory SRE is vitally important, and getting that amendment actually through Parliament is going to be massively important, because we know we've seen massive rises in harassment of students, not only in colleges, but in secondary schools across the country over the past 10 years. And that concerns me, when a girl or somebody can get called a certain name and it's not challenged and it's normalised, that's fundamentally wrong. We've got to think what we can do collectively to change and to challenge that, because that's what ultimately what it's about. And for me, I'll sort of finish off by saying, visibility for me is very important in a lot of respects. So somebody said to me, why do you feel as an elected member to tell everybody that you're gay, and why do you need to do it in public arenas? I said, well, it's vitally important because it's sort of incumbent on me as a sort of an elected official because I've got access to networks, people where I can speak to a lot of people. So of course I'm going to speak for the silent majority, because the LGBT community is that silent majority. Young people are part of that silent majority. So we've got to come together, and I am going to be in touch with all of you because I've got a few ideas about how we could connect up. But obviously people got homes to go to and probably food to eat and things like that. So thank you very much. Particularly thank you to College and Lancashire. She never likes it, but this woman is absolutely amazing for her organisational skills. So thank you very much for what you've done tonight and for the older mum. So thank you.